podcast where we put you on the map. This is Ron Costa broadcasting live in the Mappable USA studios in Las Vegas. It's so good to be back here. I'll tell you, it's great. Our last show, folks, was so popular. We were talking about issuers and things they have to know. Today we're going to piggyback on that with some great information. Before we get started, let's introduce Vicki Hachmala from the World Token Market. Vicki, how's it going over there?
Fabulous. Fabulous. Couldn't be better. Just like summer should be in Vegas. Hot, but we love it. We absolutely love it.
And as I just mentioned,
we're happy, Ron, that you're back from your hiatus in New York, back where you should be in Las Vegas.
Yeah, it's nice to be back to the dry heat versus the humid heat. So I'll take this.
Yeah.
It is nice. So anyway, Vicki, like I mentioned at the start of the show, we're going to go from point A to point B here on this Regulation A, and especially if you're an issuer, you want to listen to this podcast. Really, really important stuff that we're going to go over. And to do that, let's bring in a podcast favorite, Mike Brette. Mike, how you doing over there today?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. No, it's our pleasure. It's great. You've been on the show before. We got a lot of really good stuff from the last time that you were here. And, Mike, you're the CEO of Small Cap Equity Advisors. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, we're a consulting advisory firm to publicly traded companies and private companies, and we advise them on raising capital using equity crowdfunding, 506c private placements, and Reg A Plus. We kind of walk them through the stages we refer them out to SEC counsel for the legal work, and then accountants, and then we do the marketing and investor attraction to help the offering succeed.
That's great. No, absolutely. It's a very, very important part. And like I said before, this is something that all issuers have to listen to, because one of the biggest problems, or in fact the biggest problem I would imagine for these issuers is, okay, you got a great deal, but you have to find the investor somehow. The investors are out there. How do you bring the investor to your deal, which is obviously so important? So before we get into that, let's talk about the whole industry on a top level a little bit. Are you seeing more movement in the whole Regulation A space or crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding? Because there's a little dip there for a while. I get the sense that it's coming back a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good question. And on the equity crowdfunding side, it's really going gangbusters, especially with this pandemic. Small companies are trying to raise $200,000 to $500,000. And the equity crowdfunding is perfectly situated for a raise of that size. And then you can move up the ladder to larger raises, which we're getting a lot of traction with some people that are trying to raise $5 million to $10 million. And so that we either propose that they do a 506c private placement or a Reg A Plus if ultimately they want to list their offering, to go public. The Reg A Plus is a perfect offering for that, and we can get into all the, the pros and cons of all those. But nothing has really slowed down from a capital raising standpoint because of this virus. If anything, it's really picked up, at least in our business, because companies really need capital, whether it's, to keep their business open if they're allowed to be open, expand, make the necessary changes. If you're a restaurant or a bar, they need money for the social distancing. I mean, because, some of the restaurants that normally have 100 people can only have 50 people right now. So they really need money to, operate and expand their business and comply with all the rules and regulations. So the capital raising market is really going gangbusters in all segments.
We found that in talking to other podcast guests, we found that one thing that the virus may have done is by slowing things down a little, it's given people the opportunity to explore alternatives to the standard traditional way of raising capital. What do you think about how the virus impacted people in their ability to see what more is out there to help them?
Well, since everybody's really trapped at home, nobody's driving anymore, commuting. There's really no air travel as far as going to road shows and conferences. So what the virus has done is it's focused people's attention on doing everything over the internet with equity crowdfunding and 506c and Reg A. which all the capital raising now is done through Zoom or other online conferences, virtual meetings, and discussions. So what this virus has done, for good or for bad, is focused a small business attention on using the internet to raise capital. And of course, it's still the same, whether you're going out and face-to-face to try to meet somebody or you're doing it virtually. You have to be able to have a plan in place to attract investors to your deal. And that's one of the things that we do.
And how do you do that?
Well, there's a couple of different aspects that we bring to the table. First, we tell clients that you have to have a marketing plan, and it's got to be focused in 3 particular areas. You have to have what we call earned media, which is media coverage that Fox News or some newspaper like the Wall Street Journal will just cover you and give you exposure, and you can discuss your company and your business. That's earned media. And the other type of media is something you pay for, where you pay pay-per-click ads, display ads, social media ads that you pay for, or influencers. The other one is media that a client owns, which is their website, a blog that they might do, a podcast they might do, emails. So what we do is we do a convergence of this media between the owned media, the paid media, and the earned media. We bring it all together through a variety of different steps. One is that we issue press releases for clients. We do about 4 press releases a month. When a client signs on with us for a 4 to 6 month engagement, we'll do press releases to attract attention to their, let's say they're up on MicroVentures or some funding platform. We'll do press releases to draw attention. We'll upgrade their LinkedIn profile and connections and engagements. LinkedIn is a tremendous tool if you use it right. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't know how to use it, and we've got it down. My new partner and I, John Stoddard, we've got it down to a science on how we can engage the public on LinkedIn. Of course, then there's CEO interviews, podcasts, TV. We put together videos for clients, and we manage their LinkedIn and Facebook ads. So we have a complete laundry list of different services that we bring to a client to have them, get the word out that they're raising capital, how much they're trying to raise, and direct them to a funding portal if they're using one, or direct them to their website. It's all about marketing when you're raising money. It always has been, really. Even if, we didn't have this virus, companies still need to communicate with potential investors. And again, before we were all locked down, the best way to do that was to get out and start meeting people at conferences and over lunch and dinner and making a presentation. Now it's all virtual and done over the internet.
Yeah, pre-marketing, pre-offering marketing is vital to successful offering, because if you don't know that people are interested in what it is that you do, then they're not going to magically appear once you've gone through the Reg A process. It's not like going to be a miracle and all of a sudden everybody's flocking to invest in your company. You've got to do that ahead of time. You've got to do your homework to make it successful
absolutely.
In the end.
Yeah, absolutely. We tell clients you have to start your awareness program, your marketing, at least 60 days before the SEC qualifies your Reg A offering. Now, you can't take an investment capital before your offering is qualified by the SEC, but you can engage in a media program to tell the investing public who you are, what you're doing, where you're going, and how you're going to get there. You can talk about your product. You can talk about your service. You can tell the public where your product is sold if it's in stores. So you can lay the groundwork at least 60 days before your offering is qualified, because if you wait until the SEC gives you the green light, you're 2 to 3 months behind the rock and a hard place, and you're wasted a lot of time, and you're going to waste a lot of money. So
Absolutely.
We always tell clients, get started early.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wish more people understood that point because it's a recipe for failure if they don't start early on that for sure. But Mike, a lot of the things that we just talked about are really like social media, in particular LinkedIn. Is that really targeted more towards like an individual investor? I mean, how do you get the word out to like a broker dealer or investment banker, family office? I mean, that's got to be a different channel of advertising, right? Or contact.
Yes, it is, and that's a good point. We've my partner and I we've established because I've been in business 25 years, and I've built up through the 25 years. I've built up a nice solid network of retail investors and institutional investors, such as investment banks, broker dealers, and family offices. I'm on a first name basis with a lot of them because a lot of them would come to my roadshow meetings. I would have 25 investment banks and broker dealers and family office members at my meetings. So I've got a Rolodex of people in the East Coast and the West Coast and anywhere in between that we can get deals in front of and have them take a look at them. Now, having said that, not all broker dealers and investment banks work alike. Some of them, will have a minimum. Look, we only get involved in a deal that's $100 million or more. So you're not going to approach that particular investment bank or broker dealer. So we've got it down that we know. So for instance, if a client comes to us for a $5 million raise, we know what broker dealer we're going to contact, at least to have a discussion to find out if they're interested, and then be able to send them something to look at. And then if they're interested after that, we set up a conference call with the client, and then we walk through the steps that the broker dealer has. So it's all about networking and having the contacts for particular investment banks and brokers, so you're not wasting your time in the client's time. Because, again, we've talked about this on the show before. Raising capital costs money. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And that's so important when you bring in institutional groups like investment banks and broker dealers, because they all charge a monthly retainer, an expense fee, and then they take some points in the back end on a best efforts basis if they're successful at raising money. So, you can't take a startup that's pre-revenue to an investment bank that, charges a lot of fees to get going. First off, they won't even look at a startup, some of them. And secondly, the startup doesn't have the money to pay the banker to handle the situation anyhow, even if they want it. So, again, it's all about approaching the right groups of investors, whether it's retail or institution, and that's where a marketing firm like ours comes in. I mean, we've been doing this for years. We know what to do and how to do it and how to get the job done.
Yeah, in the scope of the conversation right now, are you using investment bankers and broker dealers interchangeably, or is there a difference between the two of them?
Well, that's a good point too. There is a little bit of a difference. Investment banks are typically just raising money. Broker dealers can raise money, but then they also trade stocks. They open up accounts for retail investors, whether you can trade stocks that are publicly traded. So I always like to differentiate between an investment bank, a broker dealer, and a family office, rather than just say institutional money, because it really depends on what the client wants. Now, again, if we have a client come to us, it's a public company, which we do, we would take them to somebody that can trade the stock, make a market the stock, as well as raise money.
Right. Can you explain what a family office is specifically? Because I'm not sure everybody knows what that is.
Sure. Yeah, a family office is typically a very wealthy, either an individual family, let's say like the Rockefellers or the Kennedys, some very extremely wealthy family that hires investment advisors to manage their money. And the advisors are kind of the gatekeeper to that deep pocket investor. That's typically a family office. Other ones are people that, let's say like Jeff Bezos from Amazon. The guy is worth $200 billion. He's set up different investment offices to handle his money, not just to make traditional investments, but invest in businesses as well. Bill Gates has done the same thing. So family offices are typically private money. They haven't gone out and raised money from other investors like a hedge fund would do. So a family office is typically sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars of a wealthy individual's money, and it's their job as advisors to invest that money as set forth in a charter.
Yeah, unfortunately, everybody that you just mentioned, I don't know.
I know of. I know of.
So it'll be fair to say then the family office is never looking for investors. They're looking for deals. Is that right?
Exactly. They're looking. Yes. That's a good way to put it. They're looking for deals and again, they're looking at specific deals. Some of them might look at a startup. Some of them might look for climate change type of a deal. I mean, they all have a specific transaction that makes them happy and what they'll put money into. They're difficult to deal with on that level. I mean, because you have to know how to approach a family office. You can find family office directories and lists, but you can't just call them up and email them and send them a business plan. It goes in the trash. So there's a protocol when you're dealing with family offices, as opposed to maybe an investment bank or broker dealer that are more open to free communication.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that it'd be easier to contact a family office via, let's say, a LinkedIn than it would be to contact a broker dealer versus via LinkedIn. Whereas, the broker dealer may take your phone call where a family office won't.
Yes, you're true on that. And a lot of times, though, it comes down to relationships. Again, broker dealers and family offices, investment banks, institutional type. I mean, it's not a secret. I mean, you could go to Google and put in, investment banks and come up with a whole list of them. Now, will those investment banks be interested in your deal? Probably not. Would they be interested in receiving your business plan? No, because they don't take cold calls. You can't just find an email address and send them a cold email. It goes in the trash. So it's all about relationships.
Absolutely.
Well, that's where you can leverage. Yeah, that's where you can leverage all your years of experience in dealing with these people. Where you obviously have a little advantage now because you've already put in the work and made those contacts. That's pretty impressive.
Yes, we have. Yes.
And people on either end of the transaction, they prefer being referred. Somebody that they know who's referring somebody, that it eliminates the cold call that you have to sort through all of the extraneous information, because now you have somebody who is bringing you something that you might be interested in and likely to even look at. So referrals and networking and contacts are vitally important tools, I think.
Yeah, they are. And I'll give you some statistics. Venture capital firms, almost every company that's trying to raise money, they think they need to contact a VC. Let me give you some statistics. Most VC firms will receive over 2,000 deals a year. They'll look at two, and they'll fund one. And the one deal that they fund is referred to them by somebody, another that they have funded in the past, an attorney, an accountant, or a trusted advisor that they know. And so they know that deal that they're receiving has already been vetted, and it's worth their time to look at it. So you can't just buy a list of VC investors and just start emailing your business plan out. You're wasting money and you're wasting time. VCs will only fund a deal that's referred to them by somebody they know and trust and funded in the past. So unless you have a specific uncle or a brother that works at a Silicon Valley VC firm that you know personally, you're wasting your time with VC firms. So transition into family offices or broker dealers or investment banks, same thing. You just can't send them something cold. It's got to be referred to somebody before you get their interest.
Well, don't VCs and angel investors also typically take a little bit more of your company than you're willing to let go of?
Yeah, angel investors and VCs, if you're talking about a true VC firm, angel investors typically put in pre-seed money, such like maybe $15,000 to $25,000. That's what an angel investor will put in, if that. VCs have a higher threshold. They're in the millions of dollars that they put in, and they will take board seats. They'll take a lot of warrants. They'll take a lot of things where you could lose control of your company at some point down the line as a founder. If you're not careful, you could lose control. Angel investors typically are the very early risk takers, and again, small amounts of money to kind of stair step you up to the bigger dollar amounts.
Yeah, and what about using financial advisors or accountants, CPAs, that kind of thing? Are they a good source of investors as well?
Yes, they are, because they have clients that are looking for a return on their money as opposed to just, putting it into a mutual fund or, a 401k or something. They're looking, but again, a CPA, a financial planner, an investment advisor, they have a fiduciary responsibility to the client. So again, if you're just sending a cold email, a business plan to a CPA, and you don't know them, they don't know you, they're probably not going to jeopardize their relationship with their client on something like that. So again, it comes down to relationships and trust. But yes, certainly attorneys, CPAs, financial planners, they all have clients with money to invest. So they're always a potential for any kind of a business.
Mike, let me ask you this. Aside from knowing about marketing ahead of time, or that doing any kind of crowdfunding offering is going to be very expensive, and making sure that you have the proper and valuable networking and contacts, what do you think is the greatest hurdle for putting together an offering? What do you advise your clients on, what it is that they need to know, or something that people just don't understand, be it legal or financial or otherwise?
Good point. Good question. First off, there are only two ways to legally raise capital. You have to have a full-blown registration with the SEC, or you have to file under one of the exemptions from registration. And those exemptions, with the passage of the Jobs Act about 6 years ago, the exemptions are equity crowdfunding, where you can file Form C with the SEC, which is like a prospectus, and wait until they give you the green light, and then you can find an approved funding platform such as microventures or flash funders or something to list it on. The second thing is a 506C private placement. That's an exemption from registration. And then Reg A Plus is another exemption under the Jobs Act for raising money. Now, those are the legal ways. Now, we get calls all the time and emails from people that all they have is a pitch deck and a business plan. They haven't gone that extra step to, get a securities lawyer to prepare the legal work for an exemption with the SEC. So they just waste their time and our time, because legally you can't do anything with a pitch deck or a business plan to raise money. So they come to us with a business plan where they probably paid $15,000 or $20,000 for the business plan, and it's like, what do you expect us to do with this? Then when you tell them they have to hire a securities lawyer to really do things legally and compliant with state and federal securities laws, they're frustrated. So, Vicki, to answer your question, those are the elements that most people don't understand, especially if they've never raised capital before. They don't understand what the step A and B and C happens to be.
Well, so it would be prudent that as soon as somebody gets the idea that, I think I'd like to raise some capital using crowdfunding, that would be the point where they would go to you and say, look, this is what I'd like to do. Can you help me figure out what I need to do so that I can do it and be successful in the end, cover all the bases?
Yeah, absolutely. And we get, John and I, my partner, we get a lot of those calls and emails on a weekly basis, that, look, either we're a startup, what do we do? Or we're doing $5 million a year in revenue selling widgets. We want to raise $25 million. What do we do? So we can advise them on the steps, to take and everything like that. Absolutely. And, they should do that on their own. If they don't come to somebody like us, they should be able to. I always tell people, look, you can't go wrong with getting a good lawyer and a good accountant if you're in business.
Exactly.
But too many people that are startups, again, they don't have a lot of cash available, so they try to go online and do it yourself when it comes to legal work, and it just doesn't work because you can't get advice from a form. You really need to have a securities lawyer that you can talk to walk you through. So everybody, I don't care whether you're a startup or a seasoned business, should have a good securities lawyer to advise them on what steps to take and how they need to comply with state and federal security laws and do it right.
Absolutely. Having worked in the legal industry for a lot of years, I would have to say that the one thing I came away with is you can't cut corners when it comes to legal advice, and you can't go online, like you said, and try to learn it from somebody who's got the miracle answer, because it's going to cost you a lot more money to go after the fact to an attorney to fix the mess that you made than just going from the start and doing it right from the beginning. You have to have a very good legal advice in anything financial. Absolutely. Any kind of transaction. You do yourself a justice not to.
Yes, you're going to pay eventually. You're either going to pay now to get it done right, or you're going to do it wrong and pay a whole lot more later on.
Exactly.
When the SEC Enforcement Division comes knocking on your door, because there's some serious consequences for not doing it right. I don't want to get into a lot of those elements here, but it could be a serious issue if you don't comply with state and federal security laws. So it's better to do it right from the get-go, spend some money. And I tell people, look, if you can't afford to spend money to do it right, whether it's hire a lawyer or to hire a marketing firm, you have no business going out there and raising money from the public. If you can't do it right, don't do it.
Absolutely.
Yep, exactly. And Michael, we don't even have to go through the do's and don'ts on this podcast because that's what we covered the last time you were on. So anybody listening to this, just do a search under napabusa.com. You'll come up with that podcast, and we'll get into that as well. But there's also the issue about accredited versus accredited investors. Correct? There's got to be a different way to market to those people.
Yes, and now under the equity crowdfunding, where you do Form C and you could raise up to $1,070,000, you can solicit money from accredited and non-accredited. With a 506C, it's just accredited investors, and with Reg A Plus, it's non-accredited and accredited. So again, those are different elements of those offerings, which again you need to be aware of. So you avoid any kind of pitfalls. But I always tell clients, look, even if you're allowed to, take investment capital from non-accredited investors, you're better off not doing it. Stick with the accredited investors who are more sophisticated, can withstand the risk and loss of their capital if and when something does go wrong. But again, the Jobs Act allows for accredited and non-accredited under certain circumstances.
Excellent. And I got one more question for you, Mike, before we kind of close this out a little bit. We talked about before the investment bankers and the broker dealers versus family offices, et cetera. Like how people sometimes have a negative connotation to broker dealers, the old Wolf of Wall Street things and everything. Yeah. Do issuers take that into account, or do they just kind of say, anyone who give me money is good with me?
Well, that's a good question. And it's too bad I have to say this, but a lot of the issuers don't have a lot of personal experience with an investment bank or broker dealer or on the institutional side, personal experience. They may have heard, things in the street or whatever, read an article, but they really don't know the inner workings if they've never been through that. I mean, when I used to do a lot of road shows in New York, I did, meetings at the Harvard Club and the Yale Club, where I'd bring the investment bankers in, and then I would take clients to the offices of investment bankers and give them that experience of seeing and meeting investment bankers so they could learn and understand how the process works. A lot of people just don't have firsthand knowledge of it. And, you get involved with the wrong broker-dealer and institutional, you get a bad taste in your mouth. But when you're dealing with investment banks and institutions like that, they're all regulated by FINRA. They're FINRA licensed broker-dealers, so there's basically a governing board that oversees, and they put their license on the line if they should do something that, is not proper. So you just have to, it's like anything else. You need to have proper advisors to walk you through the process, whether you're doing retail or whether you're doing institutional. Don't do it all by yourself. You just will not be successful.
Okay, that's great. So Vicki, did we answer the question? Did we solve everybody's problem about how to find investors and raise capital? I think everybody got a good idea about what to do now, right?
Absolutely. And I would say this, that what we learned was pay attention to pre-offering marketing, get good legal advice initially, work with somebody who has a good network with viable and valuable contacts, and if nothing else, hire Mike and his company to put you on the road to success.
And Mike, how do they do that? How do they get a hold of you?
Yes, they can call me direct at 951-236-8473. They can email me at mikebrette@gmail.com. That's Mike Brette, BRETTE @gmail.com. Or they can go to LinkedIn and they can access my profile on the LinkedIn. And I'll give you my website that you can put on your podcast. And they can also go to the website. They can see case histories of companies that we funded. They can read about our procedures. They can read about our marketing approach. They can read about all our services. And we have a section on there for frequently asked questions. They can go there and get a lot of the questions answered before they contact us. So the website that my associate John and I put together, very informative, very complete.
Okay, well, that's great. We'll link it all in the show notes for sure. And lastly, you have a book out too, don't you?
Yes, I've published 2 books. They've been out quite a while. One's called Raising Capital for Your Business, still available on Amazon.com. And I'm doing a 3rd book, which is updating that one. It's Raising Capital for Your Business Part 2, which is going to address all the equity crowdfunding, 506C, Reg A+, specifically all the do's and don'ts. I have my book proposal and outlines put together. I should have the book ready for publication in about 8 or 9 months. And my first book that I put out, which is still out there on Amazon, is called Asset Protection Planning. I've gotten a 5-star rating for that. So you can go to Amazon and get access to my books. Even though they've been out several years, they're still selling.
No, that's awesome. I mean, before everything is said and done, it might become like the Star Wars. You'll have 9 different editions in Part 3, Part 4, Part 5.
There you go.
Ron, let me say one last thing before we close. After a company hires Mike and completes a successful crowdfunding offering, they should contact us so that we could do a podcast with them and help them launch it.
That's a great idea. Absolutely. Sounds good.
That's one of the tools.
All right, everyone.
One of the tools we use. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's great.
And that's
so hopefully there's a lot of issuers. Yeah, hopefully we have a lot of issuers listening to this right now and making that call right now. This is the way to move forward. We told you that this is the way you got to raise money, find investors, and just keep listening to this podcast over and over again, and that'll be pretty good for you. So, Mike, Brett, again, thanks a lot for taking the time out to talk to our audience. We really appreciate it. You're always a great guest. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And thank you, Vicki, for co-hosting this. Everyone, you're listening to the Mappable USA podcast at MappableUSA.com. Just go to that website, scroll down. You'll see all our syndication sources, and you pick the one you like best, and you'll never miss another one of our episodes. If you like what you heard today, send us an email, info@MappableUSA.com, or just comment on the page that you're listening to this right now. That would be really great, very appreciative. And then lastly, if you want to be a guest on the show, like Mike was today. There's a guest tab there. Just fill that out, and we'll see what we can do about getting you on the show. So once again, everyone, thanks for your support. Thanks for listening, and we'll be at you next week with another Malcolm USA podcast. Have a great week, everyone.